Are we good? Well, awesome. Apologies for, blazing in here on two wheels, and being late. Everyone, sorry about that. So I want to say greetings and welcome. If we're recording, are there actually people on there? We do. Okay, all right, great. Welcome to the March 6th, 2024 meeting of the Mecklenburg County Economic Development Committee. I'm Commissioner Susan Rodriguez McDowell, and I have the pleasure of serving as chair of this committee. So we want to welcome the public who have been provided a call-in number to access this meeting. The agenda was sent out to those already on the distribution list. If anyone would like electronic copies of any presentation materials today, please make these requests via email to Megan Witt. Her email address is megan.witt@mecnc.gov. So we're going to start out with introductions, and I will start with the esteemed commissioner on my right, and we will go down the row here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Mark Terrell, District 4, also serving as Vice Chair.
Good afternoon, Laura Meyer. I represent District 5.
Good afternoon, Lee Altman, County Commissioner serving at large.
And we have an additional commissioner who has graced us with her presence, and we're so happy to have when she comes. So please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I am Mecklenburg County Commissioner Elaine Powell, representing North Mecklenburg, which is District 1, Huntersville, Davidson, Cornelius, North Charlotte, and all the ETJ.
Okay, and next we will go in the room with our staff. And let's start with you, Megan, and just go around this way.
Megan Witt, Economic Development.
Keisha Whitley, Economic Development. Jamelia David, Economic Development.
Shahid Rana, Economic Development.
Good afternoon, Leslie Johnson, Deputy County Manager.
And in the back is, are you?
Tom DeLong, City of Charlotte Economic Development.
All right, okay. And
Good afternoon, James LeVar, SVP of Economic Development at Charlotte Sensitive Partners.
awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. So first things first, we have to approve our minutes. Do we have some folks online? Okay.
Yes, so we do have a few guests online. We do have Roger Johnson, Director of Economic Development from Mecklenburg County. Janelle Rosales with Economic Development, and Fred Atimo as well. Brett Clampett with Public Information, and Paige McKinney, Mint Hill Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, y'all. Really appreciate that. So next we will entertain a motion to approve our minutes from, was it February 6th? Yeah, the February 6th minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, the motion is made by Commissioner Meyer, seconded by Commissioner Altman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that is unanimous. The meeting minutes for February 6th, 2024 have been approved. So next I will recognize Deputy County Manager Leslie Johnson to introduce the next agenda items.
Awesome, thank you. And again, good afternoon. We have 2 agenda items for you today. Our intent is to try to manage the agenda within the hour so that at 4 you can transition and go to the celebratory and sad farewell goodbye for Starla, which will be up in 280 where we normally have economic development meeting. With that as the backdrop, the 2 agenda items that we have today is 1, we'd love you to have an opportunity to have macro level overview, as well as be able to have the opportunity to have Q&A around the state of Center City. I know you may have heard us mention a few things that are just happening in the economy at large, and we think that it's important that you understand what's happening in this geographic boundary. We may have a subsequent presentations about other areas, but this one is the one that's on this area today. The second thing that we wanted to do is we gave you a tee up on the introductory side about our workforce development pilot project, which was the career readiness workshops coupled with the Job Expo. We'd like to sprinkle a little bit more highlights with you on that as we're still gathering data as post assessment as it relates to the Job Expo, but we have enough that we want to at least give you a little bit more insight and be timely around that. With that, I'll turn it over to James, and we appreciate you being here.
Thank you again, Chair and committee members. And thank you to the Economic Development Department, with a special call out to Roger and Shaw for setting up the conversation to talk about the state of the Center City. So we're here to, and Michael Smith will be coming in hot from another meeting as well. We're here to share about how Center City is adapting to the disruptions that have happened over the last 4 years. Those disruptions would include pandemic lockdowns, altered work rhythms, and then high funding costs. And one of the adaptation overall is that the central business district for the region, for the county, for the city, is adapting into a central activity district. And we're seeing this trend across multiple downtowns across the country. And as it relates to Center City is adapting well. But we do have one large vulnerability, which affects not only Center City, Uptown, South End, and Midtown, also affects the city, the county, and the region. And we'll talk a little bit about that, what that vulnerability is. So on the aspects of how Center City is doing it adaptation-wise with these disruptions, there's a number of things that are going well. And so we're going to talk about those things. Down at the bottom here, there's a few sentences under those numbers. I don't know if we can hide that one aspect. If not, I can easily describe them. So let's talk about the 78% number. So this is 78. We have a tool that measures when people come in and out of geographical areas. And right now, the people working in Uptown and South End is at a 78% level compared to pre-pandemic levels. The 78% number is relatively high in the country. Most downtowns are not near this recovery level back. 34,000. We've had a number of residential units come online for people to live really close to where they work and like to socialize using all different types of mobility options. So 34,000 people live in Uptown and South End. 264,000 visits. This is just on one single day, the number of visits coming into Uptown to experience Loop Cones in July of 2023. So the visitor economy is super strong. And this really relates to how Bank of America is now programmed, going from just a dozen football games several years ago now to a dozen football games to 17, 18 Charlotte FC games to a series of concerts. And that concert environment has really enlivened Uptown and South End and really illustrative of moving to a central activity district. And then the last number here is 2 times. So South End is one of the hottest submarkets, and that's in this area here across the country, where it's only one of two submarkets in the entire nation that has doubled the amount of office in the last 5 years. And we can talk a little bit about that, but South End is a great illustration of a central activity district, a more balanced and complete neighborhood. So these are some of the aspects that are doing really well within Center City. One of the vulnerabilities, again, is office space. One of the things that has carried Uptown and South End through these disruptions, which this graph talks about. So everything in blue has been built in this last economic development cycle since 2010. In essence, we built an entire city that was that on top of another city. The other thing that we have here, we have number of construction projects under construction in green now. Good example of this is the Pearl or Riverside's big residential unit construction. And then we have a number of things planned that probably will not happen in the next couple of years until monetary policies change at the federal level. So these are probably delayed, but they're still in the works. One of the things that concerns one of those vulnerabilities is everything that's in orange could possibly be further delayed if we don't really address something that we call vintage office. And this is a series of office buildings, mostly built before the year 2000, that have either gone back to the bank or in some sort of special handling, or they have more than 30% vacancy in those buildings. And we're going to talk about a little bit about the characteristics of those buildings and then where they're located. Before we get to looking exactly where those buildings are, let's take just a sense of Uptown, as it relates to an important asset, and then focusing in on the office aspect of Uptown. So first, Uptown, which is this small little area here, right? So about less than 0.5% of all the land mass in the county. It is the cultural hospitality, the nexus of all our transportation, sports, 110,000 workers coming in and out every day in Uptown alone. 300 to 400 small businesses operating within that space, has 12 higher educational institutions located within it. And again, 34,000 people that live there. It also has 27 million square feet of office. And if you were to look at that office asset, in less than, again, 0.5% of the county's land mass, it creates about approximately $8 billion of market value, which is 32% of the entire market value of office across the entire county. So extremely small land mass, a lot of density, delivering a ton of market value across the county, creating a really solid tax base for a variety of services across the county. Again, really just reaffirming that this one asset within Uptown is a county and regional asset that is also coupled with assets across all various different sectors. So in that 8 billion of market value, 27 million square feet, 110,000 workers. We have inside those 110,000 workers, we have 4 Fortune 500 headquarters. And right now, what we're seeing across that 27 million square feet is that we have higher than the national average vacancy rate. Right now, the national average is a little bit below 19%. We're sitting at between 19 and 20%. And then if you take some of the floors that have a lease on them, but they're still available, so they're still being marketed, but there's no one working in them now, that availability, the vacancy rate goes up to about 21 to 23% of available floors, available space inside of Uptown. And we're about to see a map here about where those floors are and where those buildings are. Let's see about that. So again, we've now really focused in on Center City, left off South End. We're just concentrating in Uptown. Now we're looking at that 27 million square feet of office in Uptown. And so right now, looking at a 19 to 20% vacancy rate, going up to 21%, 22% of available floors or available space. We have about 165 to 170 full floors available. And then 22 additional floors, approximately 600,000 square feet that is being marketed right now to be filled. And this available space is a very large increase, or 88% increase from pre-pandemic levels. What's interesting about it is that those available floors are really focused in on or concentrated in a series of about 12 to 15 assets. And so we've identified those as troubled assets. Either they're gone back, as we've talked about before, about receivership, or there's more than 30% of the available space in that building available. And these buildings share a series of characteristics. One, they're all very closely clustered together. You can see them here in red, in and around the Wells 2 Plaza, in between, on near Tryon Street or College Street, located between Martin Luther King III all the way up to about 6th. And so one of the pieces about these vintage office buildings is that here's a good example. I won't exactly tell you what building this is in, but through the activities that we work together in the economic development ecosystem with Shaw and Roger on any kind of recruitment project, or an expansion project, like an existing employer already in the county. And when they talk about, hey, we're looking to expand or we're looking to relocate, never in those conversations did they describe space that looks like this. No one is pining to get into space that was built anything, 1985, 1995, in order to say, hey, this is where our company wants to grow. This is where We want people back together, collaborating, and we believe space like that will draw them in. Because that's like one of the big equations in the economic development space right now. So as I talked about before, as we started studying these troubled assets, we also started looking at a variety of cities about what they're doing, going towards as it relates to making those adaptations from the pandemic. And so again, moving the central business district to a central activity district. And the main reason why is that with less frequent office-centric work, lots of downtowns are advancing initiatives to become more diverse in regards to the way that it's being used, in the demographics as well, into active downtowns. And so that less frequent office-centric work really relates to what we're seeing as smaller leases. So since the pandemic, lease size is down 25%. Also, this relates to one, the high cost of things, right? So in order to get more bang for your buck, you take down a smaller space, you have it fully amenitized. Office spaces look like this. They're very reminiscent of people's homes. They're also reminiscent of hotel lobbies in order to bring together those collaborative spaces. We're also seeing that the amount of square footage that each person uses in the office is at a 22-year low. And then we're also seeing, since the pandemic, a little bit of a delta between, even though employment is up, right, office occupancy is down. And so with those types of trends, right, we're seeing, again, less frequent office-centric work, therefore, moving in this direction of downtowns, going from central business districts to central activity districts. The other piece is that 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, lots of economic development conversations always started with where a CEO or C-suite executive would live and where they want an office. And it was all about the proximity of that. It is no longer that. It is driven on talent alone. That where's the space that talent will be attracted to come to? And not only does it go, it goes beyond just the office. That office environment is not to be surrounded by other office. It's to be surrounded by other uses. And so again, that movement towards the central business district looking like a variety of other activities. And so by studying other downtowns, we looked at how other cities and counties, what initiatives they're doing. And we plucked one from the city of Seattle and modified it in such a way that became very Charlotte-centric. And we did a vintage office design competition. And Roger, he served on the committee of evaluating those submittals. And in those submittals, we were looking for ways to strengthen Uptown and bringing additional activities to it. What activities, more residents, higher education, childcare, housing, could we bring into those vintage office buildings in order to make that asset stronger? Through the design competition, share ideas, look for viable solutions, look at policies across from the federal government, from other places in order to make it happen. And we learned a series of things, which we'll talk about in the last slide. And then also understand all these greater public benefits that could come inside or from those vintage office. Everything from workforce development programs, enhanced and more inclusive public spaces. Again, childcare, understanding that that is a huge barrier to a variety of employment opportunities. These buildings are older, so they're not the most energy efficient. As there are ways to bring in enhanced environmental stewardship in these reimagined spaces. And then obvious pieces of the center city, it being a regional asset for inclusiveness and diversity, right? In regards to especially small business, inclusion and equity conversations. And then the last one that you can't see that's underneath the 9 participants is housing, affordable and attainable housing. And so here you can see pictures on these were the 2 winners of the competition. So this is a reimagined space of 1 Wells or 300 South College. if you're familiar with this building, they essentially, their idea was to do a lot of selective demolition in order to create that enhanced public space, in order to bring in a ton of sustainability and environmental stewardship ideas, to put in a childcare facility that any working parent can take advantage of now. The other winner here is the old Duke Energy headquarters, 526 Church, now being reimagined as a series of residential units and a place for a ton of retail activity that sits adjacent to the Bank of America Stadium, really creating an amazing public inclusive space in order to tether itself to all the activities that concerts, soccer matches, and football games at the stadium. We had several submittals, and these were just the two winners. We also had an amazing second place winner. If you're familiar with the Duke Raider Foundation. This is William's work over on the west side. He has are you familiar with
Duke Raider?
Duke Raider? So it's a workforce development program that sits in the basement of a church right now, and he's looking to create another workforce development program that will work with disenfranchised youth, and to put that workforce development program inside of a vintage building in Uptown. In fact, on the map, we have it identified. So there's just the Brooklyn Church project that was one of the big winners of the design competition. This is the Duke Raider buildings, 500 North Tryon. And
The old gated Hubert.
Hartigan is the current owner, is working with William in order to bring that workforce development project to life. So from that competition, and again, this is a rendering of Harvey Gantt's building on 500 North Tryon, and reimagined with a coffee shop and a tech-based workforce development system in order to get those underinvested youth engaged within the modern economy. And so what did we learn from this office learning exercise? One, when we looked across the landscape and what we saw in those place-based solutions in those buildings, that targeted private and public investments, the phrase that we heard during the panel conversation with Roger sat on, was urban acupuncture. That those investments in those singular buildings, or a few of those singular buildings, could have long-lasting impacts. That the desire and the need for a well-designed public sector tool, almost every city and many counties across the country are trying to figure this out. Many have some tools, and they have a lot of projects identified. It'll be very interesting to see if those projects ever get done. We believe that one of the best practices is to design a tool that will encourage projects to be completed. The other idea of thinking about incentives about selective demolition, almost every project that came in had some idea of taking buildings, something aspect away in order to provide it back to the public. We're not going to convert our way out of this vulnerability, but we got to work on supply and demand, work on the product, on the office part, lessening that. In doing and lessening this vintage office, we strengthened all existing office, and we strengthened the existing tax base. And then the other aspect, it's going to take multiple flavors of capital to try to do this, because of high monetary costs now and high construction costs, and then conversions are extremely expensive ordeals. And then the last piece here is that similar to how other parts of our economy see opportunity with one of these vintage buildings, we believe that it's also a public sector opportunity. Eventually, the market will solve this, but two things will probably happen. One, a whole bunch of time will go by, and us as a region, us as a county, a city, a downtown, we won't be as competitive as we are now. The second thing is, if the private sector, the market does it, we will lose that opportunity to add those activities that would benefit our community, that would align with the priorities and values of our public sector partners. Also, every city's trying to figure this out. If we were to get one where private and public and philanthropic funds come together, we would send a really strong signal in this competitive world that we're ready to do this, that we're ready to take advantage of those vintage office opportunities to make our downtown, our uptown, more balanced and complete. And then the federal government is also trying to figure this out. And if there are local resources that we can tie with federal resources, with philanthropic and the private market, then those investments within those buildings that are identified as red right now in Uptown can have a tremendous impact, leveraging a braided source of a variety of capital. And so with that, pause for Michael and I to questions, discussions about any of the ideas that or any insights that we've shared today.
Well, first of all, let me say, welcome to Michael Smith, for those that are watching, virtually and those, maybe you haven't met in the past. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. And also, I believe we have Greg Spanberg is here, with us as well. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Clay Andrews with Office of Economic Development.
Awesome. And we have some.
Ask us Economic Development.
Okay. So now that we're all up to speed on who's in the room, let us open up the floor. I think this presentation has a lot that we could be discussing, and I'm sure that we will have some lively questions and answers. So do I see anyone who wants to begin? Okay, Commissioner Altman.
So much for the presentation. This is not why you're here, but it occurs to me you might be able to provide something that I've been wondering about. You mentioned that there's $8 billion of market value for office in Uptown, 25 billion countywide. And I've been wanting to know what is the GDP of the county and to really get a breakdown of that. So I don't know if that's metrics that you have access to in the future, but I would love to have that if that's being calculated by anyone.
Yeah, that'd be rich to know.
Yeah.
We'll look into it.
Yeah. Thank you, because I'm interested to understand our GDP relative to the rest of the state and other peer cities. But with respect to your presentation today, obviously we've been reading about this in the media and, familiar with the presentations that have been, the competition that you held, which I thought was cool and innovative, a good idea. And I love, your mention of childcare on site as a piece of something that, future forward-thinking folks are working on. I remember my favorite economist, Laura Ulrich of the Federal Reserve, saying that childcare is infrastructure. And as the mother of 3 who was working all along, I can attest to that. So I hope that anyone who's listening will take that very seriously, who's in a position to really build that into their workplace model, including the county one day, hopefully. But Dr. Ulrich also observed recently that it's just a handful. She said it's a handful of office buildings in reference to, I think, what you're presenting on today. It's not something that's systemic that will cause the banking system or the broader economy to falter. For the people who own those particular buildings, it's going to be tough. So I guess if, I guess I want to know, do you disagree with that assessment? Because when I, read that, as I'm understanding her, she does not feel that our economy here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg is threatened by the problems that you've identified today. And so I'd like to know if you have a contrary opinion, and if so, why?
So I agree that we're not going to have system failure because of the challenge that's identified here. I don't think that's what the threat is. I think the threat is that if we utilize, if market forces take care of this, or if we try to use existing tools, that we will not be pleased with the outcome. That it will be a protracted, could be decade and a half kind of recovery. We are always in competition for talent and capital and new industry, and they're going to choose places that solve problems aggressively. The threat is that we have a collection of underutilized assets that it's not who owns them now, they have lost. Okay, so the equity in those ownerships are not. We're thinking of these buildings, like you talked about childcare, as infrastructure. And if we have blocks that have inactivity, those new owners, it's going to have to go through multiple owners before it gets to a new capital source that's going to be willing to invest. So that means public safety threats. That means inactivity, and inactivity begets more inactivity. And, with this sitting on, $8 billion of value to our community, it's where the majority of our greatest jobs are for our citizens. And we've had a protracted, since 1966, we've had a strategy saying, we're going to reinforce this place. We're going to have good infrastructure for it. It's going to create lots of opportunities. We're going to put uses together that use the infrastructure effectively. Because the beauty is every time we add a new building here, a new cultural use, a new not-for-profit, we're not doing sewer extensions. We're not adding transit stops. We're not adding roads. It's all using the same stuff that's already been created by the public sector. So the threat is, does this metastasize?
Thank you.
Commissioner Meyer?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and I'm really excited to, I'd heard about the competition, and I'm really excited that we're seeing the results. So thank you for that, and I have a question about that. On that slide 6, that the bottom, the Duke Energy building. So is that able to, is that they're able to turn that into, to convert that into residential? Because I know their office and residential have different rules and, policies that they have to abide by. And that's one of those that can?
Yes, so this project, as part of the competition, it won. One of the criteria when the committee evaluated was like leaning towards action, and it scored really high in leaning towards action because Duke Energy sold the building to Asana Partners, locally HQ'd here, in conjunction with MRP out of Washington, DC. And so they are converting that office building into about 440 residential units. For our understanding, the way that building was built, it was built by Duke Energy's nuclear team, and those engineers really built it strongly. Let's put it that way. And then that gave it the ability to be converted. They have figured it out, and from one of the standpoints of that building, if they were to demo it, it's a lot of concrete to demo. And so this the environmental stewardship angle that Asana has taken also enabled their financial model to come to fruition to say, we think we can do it. And they were one of the, from our understanding, the few bidders that actually saw a conversion opportunity in it. Again, through the use of selective demolition, taking something away and then modifying the existing building.
And these projects, these two, and then the third one that you showed us, these are slated to actually happen with the, but we're talking about a public-private partnership. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, so Asana and MRP have come to the county and said, we'd like to explore how to make this work. What made this possible too is Duke wanted to be good environmental stewards of their building. They did not select the highest bidder. They selected a partner who was committed to adaptive reuse. And we're thrilled by that because we have done a lot of demolition in Uptown and like some preservation, and that's part of the approach. But they sold it for less, which made it more viable. But as they got deeper into it, it's almost all of these projects are going to require some kind of public-private partnership.
Is this Duke building, is this what you guys presented to us? It is, right?
Correct.
Okay.
The other project here on the top, One Wells, we do not know of any, plans for the submittal, the ideas that were in the submittal to go forward. One of the other idea from the entire competition was to, instill creativity and innovation in regard to like what could happen. And so, and also to identify what policies from the federal, state and local could help make it come to fruition. And that the childcare idea was and some federal funding that they've identified for the project was the real gem within that submittal, as opposed to, hey, this one's really leaning towards action.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the presentation. So a couple questions that I have, and Michael, I think you know me well enough to know that one of my questions would be related to the end user, particularly as it relates to the people that we serve from a county perspective. I certainly, at a high level, understand what we're trying to solve to. But my concern would be, the scope of responsibility of folks that we serve, and then balancing that as well with the greater need of the community, right? Fill space. So when we look at public benefit, what have you all thought about? And I get it at a high level. We're saying childcare could be something, environmental stewardship could be something. For me, though, I would want more specifics around where our investment would lead us to with our end user. Those folks that are 30% AMI below, how do they participate? What does this look like? Not just, if we talk about workforce or creating space for potential employers, do our folks have access? And so that public benefits agreement would be really, really important to me. And I suspect to some of my colleagues as well, but really spelling that out, I think I personally have some lessons learned from some of these other deals that I've had to raise my hand for. And maybe not as comfortable at this point in hindsight. So I'll let you kind of, maybe if you want to respond to that or just think about it.
So I think James made this point earlier. James made this point earlier that we've got a unique moment where I think there is great public good in and of itself for us to aggressively solve these problems and for the market to play the lead role. But we have aspired for a long time for Uptown to be a more complete place where it's not just where you go for office. And these times in the market allow us to make those changes more quickly, to go from central business to central activity district. And as a co-investor in these projects, I think sharing your priorities makes perfect sense. I think in each of those, you're working with a partner who's trying to solve for a financial problem. So, if we raise the cost of the project, then it raises the co-investment. But I think there's things that can be done that do not raise the cost of the project. Those are some of the things I'd probably look to first, where it can be more inclusive. It can reflect all the constituents that you represent. Probably can't get all of them in every project, but I think we're going to have different projects that come through that allow us to identify this is one that we can really act on here. And here's another one that's maybe this one does a better job with workforce opportunities. Maybe this one's affordable commercial space. We are woefully underserved with childcare resources in Uptown. So maybe this is the one where I've had a dream for a while that, what if we could create a collaborative childcare facility that had multiple corporations as partners, maybe there's a public sector participation, maybe not. That has scholarshiped students that are a part of it. We're trying to see this as an opportunity where we get to be creative.
Yeah, and to that point, I guess that's good to hear because sometimes when things get to us, the cake is already baked. So then when we're trying, well, I'm just teeing it up so you can understand what my lens may be. Sometimes it's already baked, and so it's like, okay, here is what you get to choose from. So if Mark decides to push back and say, hey, I want X, Y, and Z, then there's a brick wall saying that we can't, but knowing that the cake isn't already baked is very helpful for me in particular, and I think for my colleagues as well. And the final comment that I would make is, we do have an issue with Uptown, right? We do. There is an issue. And I will choose to look at it at this point as an opportunity for us to do something unique and creative, to your point, potentially, through a lens that says people in our community, everyone will find benefit within this area as far and really meeting our priorities as a board, but being forward thinking as well. Because if we just solve to Uptown for today's millennial crowd or any sort of carbon cutout, what does that mean when we get to 2034, 2044, or 54 for the community, right? Do people sitting in this committee at that point have to reinvest a tremendous amount of dollars because we were not forward thinking? And so I really want to go into it methodically and strategically with a forward-thinking lens that's comprehensive and includes everybody. So I'll leave my comment there because I know we'll come back to it.
Great. Before I sort of provide a little bit of wrap up, Commissioner Powell, do you have any comments that you would like to make or questions?
For sure. Thank you for your presentation. I love problem solving. I really like your focus on space that attracts talent. I think you need to start with that. And like Commissioner Jarrell said, we have a strong aversion to anything coming to us where the cake has been baked. And so it's good that we're all here now. For decades, I've heard lots of greenwashing. And so I would like specifics on what are the, spell it out. What are the elements, especially of this winning project? What are the elements of true environmental stewardship? I mean, you can't just say to me, oh, it's environmental. I need to know it's truly environmental. And I've seen some of this personally, reimagining in Philadelphia, where it was environmental and it was just greenwashing. So I think that's something really important for us to focus on, because it's going to be part of every conversation that we have. And we need to make sure that who's ever coming to us is true, that this is true. And I think if you'd like to speak to that, I don't know who the judge was, all the judges were for this competition, but I'd like to hear your response.
Yeah, so I may be oversimplifying, but environmental sustainability, beginning with not filling the landfill, goes a really long way. I mean, an incredibly long way.
Waste management is a big element of environmental stewardship.
Yeah, and I'll let this developer share, and I've taken notes. I'll make sure they include that kind of thinking in their proposal that they share with your team. Yeah, I know that's a part of it. And the thing that I like about this proposal and the fact that it's the first one that we're considering is it's a local developer. I mean, they're based in South End. I've seen the work they've done. They're really creative. They're well financed. They're pros, and they have to live here. So and we're figuring something new out. We studied 12, 13 other markets, and we didn't say, oh, Chicago got it right. We'll just take their whole playbook. There were pieces that we liked from different communities. And you guys as policymakers, I'd love for us to find some tools that, like a tool that's flexible, but that creates some policy guidelines so that the market knows how to work with you and knows what your values are. And we can be more attractive for outside capital to come into our community to help us with a big complex problem.
And I just want to say, you know, we have experts that can talk to project people about what to do better. We have experts here who would love to do that. And so we can all meet on that. And after all these years, now I get the chance to, in my position, a lot of relocation scouts will call me to talk about what is important to the people that they're relocating. And they keep calling me because they know I'm the chair of environmental stewardship and how much I care. And these are top priorities, like for the talent, like they care about livability, about air quality, water quality, natural environment, tree count, they care about. And so, you know, you reflect that caring in the work that you do and the things that we approve. And if environmental stewardship isn't truly in there, you know, it's not going to get my vote. So we have experts here that are willing to work on making it the best possible.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. That's great. I love how you're putting a real point on that. So first of all, I just want to say, I like how you guys introduced this process with a design contest, right? Because creativity is how we're going to solve problems, right? And focusing on the people who think creatively, designers, you know, people who are forward thinking, aren't always where things begin. A lot of times it begins with the people who are, you know, doing the spreadsheets or the money, basically, pushing the money around and not thinking through. Creativity is just the root of how we're going to solve problems. And so, but I think I appreciate what you're asking for is policy guidelines so that the market forces can understand what our priorities are and our goals. And so it's super important that we're clear about that. And so that's why I appreciate Commissioner Powell making that point about environmental sustainability and environmental stewardship is not just a word, you know, has real concrete concepts that we are very, very important to us. So I think the bottom line for what I'm hearing is the devil is in the details, right? I think that we all want our city to be successful. I think we all feel a sense of responsibility toward our residents, that we are maintaining the city in a way that is responsible. But we also feel, speaking for myself, I also feel a huge responsibility to our taxpayers, to our residents, that we are not using their money in a way that just really enhances some people's portfolios and creating huge wealth for them at the expense of our residents and our taxpayers and the people that we serve, as Vice Chairman Jarrell said. So I think we feel open But our priorities being what they are, and keeping them in the forefront, are part of the details that we really need, to know, are being considered. And so I think our staff is excellent at helping us come up with, the guidelines and the policies and helping us to consider how to move forward with those. And so really appreciate you guys bringing, your piece, to us, and not just, waiting until you've got something all the way baked. As we've all said, we want to move forward in a different way from the way things have been done in the past. So appreciate you guys so much for being here and for explaining, where you're coming from. I've really learned a lot today, about what's happening, for you guys and for, our center city. So it's been super helpful.
Thank you.
I think, Commissioner Altman had another comment.
Thank you. I'll be so brief. I feel I should maybe be a little more direct, because if it comes before us again, if you sort of, we set out some of our policy guidelines and let's say y'all hit what our board priorities are and they're there, I still am going to need more to demonstrate that this is not like a bailout for the private sector. Because obviously we want to mitigate any spread of a depressed economic activity in Uptown, but there's a lot, the marketplace is a jungle. And, I'm not clear yet why we should be using taxpayer dollars for this at all. So I would need folks to come in and really tell me the real threat. I mean, you've represented it today, but I would need more experts and stuff to talk about, the real threat that we're looking down the gauntlet here if we don't do this, and to have a clearer picture of the cost, because I'm pretty uncomfortable with the concept. Just because at this point, it mostly sounds like a bailout for the private sector.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you for making that point, and I agree with you. And but I think we also know that we don't want our city to fail, right? Because that wouldn't help our residents, our taxpayers, our base. And so we know this is a delicate balance. And so, but that's why the devils are in the detail. So we've got to get those details before we could feel any way comfortable, moving forward.
Commissioner, I'm glad to meet and share more of what we have. And we're also glad to provide staff with others who can come in and provide perspective that are even more third party.
Yeah, I
You have a
appreciate
great
that. I do
team.
think it would need to be in public with everyone I mean, seems like something I would definitely want to be doing in public, but.
Right.
But I look forward to the details as we go forward, and I am open.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell?
Yeah.
So two things I'd like to bring to your attention. One, of course, we're getting close to time. So with that, one option is for us to punt that agenda item to our April meeting, recognizing our next meeting in March would be what we normally do around business incentives. That's okay, nothing lost. We got a lot of positive things to share about the expo as well as the job readiness. So that could work as long as you be patient with us to get it to you a little later. We'll have more information because we actually have a follow-up retreat conversation next week to try to start doing closeout and get more performance information. So we were just going to highlight some things. So I think we can just give you more substance at the April meeting. And then the other thing that I would note before you entertain closing the meeting would be, as you have already made reference, we have had some early conversations about what we've called Brooklyn in Church. And so that Brooklyn in Church, that was what we presented the project to you in that name and title. And we will share more information with you. And I think you will have that opportunity to dive deeper in those conversations with the types of things that you're expecting from a public benefit and the like. So more to come with regards to that. They highlighted that because it was one of the things that was part of their competition, but the intent wasn't for them to highlight and go deep on that project. But I still think the information that you've shared is very valuable because they work with the developer and partners, and it's equally important for them to hear your priorities and your perspective so that they can be advocates on your behalf as well. And as you noted, I think we're all trying to ensure that we do what's right for the community and find that balance. And you want to have your uptown to be a viable space and be nimble and be an attractive place and try to figure out what we need to do. So if that's okay with you, we'll defer the second agenda item and you can bring the meeting to a close.
Okay, what I'd like to say is that instead of pushing it to April, could we push it to our second meeting in March so that we don't overload, I don't want to kick it down too far. And sometimes we don't have that second meeting in the month because, we don't have any closed session or things like that. So if we could do it that way, would that work for you guys?
I do believe that there's several closed session items that are being planned for the meeting, and that meeting is typically the hour meeting. Remember, not the hour and a half. Typically, this is your hour and a half meeting, but we did not do the hour and a half in order to give you the transition time. And I have received, right, wrong, or indifferent, a text from Derek, and they're getting ready to shift to the remarks. So I want to make sure that you're there and timely for that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that very much. Yes, and having this discussion go deeper and coming back with more players, to talk the details would be great. So thank you. So with that, we're going to go ahead and if I hear
Motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn. Okay. So motion to adjourn. Or do we have to go? Let's see. Oh, no. Motion to adjourn by Commissioner Altman, seconded by Commissioner Meyer. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Really interesting.